You're watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for tuning in this morning. Tesla, the second best-selling brand in California, continues to face challenges in the state. The last time we checked in with Brian Maas, the president of the California New Car Dealers Association, we discussed the decline of Tesla registration. On today's show, we want to get an update on how things are going and some of the other key takeaways from their Q2 Auto Outlook report. So Brian, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Happy to be back with you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Sure. So in the first quarter outlook, we discussed the decline of Tesla registrations. Where do things stand today?
Their market share continues to drop in California, 3 consecutive quarters in a row now, which is unprecedented in Tesla's history.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, they're still the number 2 brand in the Golden State, but it appears the bloom is off the rose for Tesla in California.
Sure. So what does the shift tell us about changing consumer preferences in the state? What is it, because of the plethora of other EVs available?
Yeah, I think there's a lot more choice available to consumers. Most of the OEMs that our franchise dealers represent have electrified or fully battery electric vehicles available. There's fuel cell vehicles. There's a lot more choice in the marketplace than there has been in the past. And to be honest, Tesla's vehicles are getting a little old.
Yeah.
You know, the Model 3 and the Model Y haven't substantially changed since they were introduced. And their OEM competitors are constantly rebranding, refreshing their vehicle offerings. And the people who bought Teslas already bought them. So I think you're seeing that reflected in the sales numbers.
That's a good point. With Tesla's market share slipping, which brands are emerging as key competitors in the California EV market?
Well, if you look at the EV data, the Hyundai Ioniq 5 is the next highest EV vehicle.
Yeah, that's a nice car.
The Mach-E continues to do well.
Okay, that makes sense.
Plug-in hybrid, the Toyota RAV4 is a very big seller. Most of our Toyota dealers can't keep those in stock.
Yeah.
And I drive a plug-in hybrid myself, so I understand the appeal. They're a great vehicle for people who need the long range of ICE, but want to go electric for their local commute. So again, the fact that there are so many more options available, it's what we hoped and expected would happen. Once the competition matured enough, Tesla was going to face the same competition all the OEMs have dealt with for decades.
Right. So where does it stand now with regard to the market share of with EVs in the state of California? What percentage are you at?
Yeah, so we're at about 21.4%, which is 3 times the national battery electric vehicle market share.
Wow.
So, 1 out of every 5 EVs sold in the country is sold in California.
Right. Wow.
Our share of total U.S. BEVs is actually a third. If you do the math, I went to law school, so I'm not a math genius, but
but if I am wrong with the numbers, you can sue me. So that's that's good news.
We don't want to do that. No lawsuits.
No
this
lawsuits.
is a lawsuit-free zone here on
you would think,
sure.
Right? That's right. So wow, those numbers are staggering for sure. Wow,
they're staggering, and part of it is. California likes to be first in adopting new technologies. We're home of Silicon Valley. Tesla got its start in California. Rivian is headquartered in California. Lucid is headquartered in California. Many of the design studios for the OEMs our dealers represent are located in California. So it's not surprising that Californians embrace these vehicles, but I don't think anybody thought in the latter half of 2024, we'd still be 3 times the rest of the country.
Yeah, it's incredible. In fact, I would imagine OEM executives look at California and go, "Told you, the market is there. We got to build more of these things."
Well, and that's the challenge. The question is how much the market can continue to grow and at what pace. I mean, it's incredible that 21% BEV market share, but our zero emission vehicle mandates require us to get to 35% in a year and a half, 2026, 68% in 2030, and 100% in 2035. That's a tall order even for California.
No question about it. Yeah. So having said that, what impact do the results of the presidential election, which is now less than 90 days away, what does that have on the overall environment with EVs in mind and with California consumers out there, and where does that stand?
Yeah, I think everybody in the auto industry is going to be watching with considerable interest whether Trump or Harris wins. And I think it's going to, at least in the short and medium term, dictate where our policy is going. If Trump returns to office, likely to challenge California's waivers, which allow California to set rules for California and the CARB states that follow California.
Right.
Those could be put in jeopardy. Interestingly, though, Mr. Trump said in his X interview with Elon Musk that, well, he supports EVs. So it's not exactly clear where he's going to go. And then you assume that a Harris administration would largely continue the direction that the Biden administration has gone, which is continuing to push the EPA and NHTSA and hopefully harmonize those rules with California going forward. So it's a big election in the auto sector in terms of where the future of this technology goes.
Yeah. And the consumers on this particular point specifically, they're not really paying too much attention to that element, right? They're not going, oh, what are the percentages by 2035 and 2025? And the average consumer doesn't know, maybe doesn't even really care. On the average, obviously there's outliers out there that say, no, I very much care, but for the most part, I don't know that would be a deciding factor for a voter, right?
Yeah, any survey I've seen, people care about climate change. Obviously, Democrats tend to care more about that than Republicans.
Sure.
But translating climate change into BEV market share is an order of seriousness and kind of granularity that most voters don't care about. No. Most voters are thinking about the bigger issues, what's happening with housing costs and inflation and the border and abortion and kind of the bigger issues that are being talked about. This is somewhere in the middle or lower tier of priorities for the average voter.
That's right. It looks like the Fed will probably cut rates from all of what, we hear all the talking heads on CNBC and such, and all the people out there that say, hey, it looks like they're going to cut the rate, whether it be, 25 basis points or 50 basis points. We don't know yet, I don't think. But we're moving in the right direction, right? Because obviously interest rates play a big role in the car industry, right?
For sure. And I think part of the struggles that our dealers have been having, increased inventory and, we've returned to a more pre-COVID environment of rebates and discounting. They have to discount these cars. They're expensive.
Yeah.
The prices have increased tremendously in the last 5 years. And the average consumer that wants to enter the new vehicle market is looking at daunting interest rates, 8-10% or more.
Yeah.
And they can't afford that.
That's
so
right.
Any relief on interest rates is going to help the new and used vehicle market going forward.
Right. And the interest rate's only one part of it. The other is the affordability, with the average price of a new car being, $47,000, $48,000 is absolutely crazy for the average consumer out there today, right? And so there's got to be some relief on the horizon.
And I think what's concerning to me as I look at the market is a lot of the OEMs have gotten away from what we used to call entry-level vehicles.
That's right. Yeah,
the 4-cylinder ICE car that you could get without too many features. that's looking for a needle in a haystack right now. There
I know.
aren't that many of those cars around, and the manufacturers, in part to pay for the electrification of their fleet, are moving more toward bigger vehicles,
I
more
know.
expensive
Yep.
vehicles, ones with more features, to pay for the fact that they've got to transition to zero emission technology. And that means the entry level consumer isn't able to find those vehicles as readily as they were before. I mean,
Yeah.
frankly, what we need for the EV transition is the hypothetical $20,000-$25,000 entry level
That's right.
EV.
That's
And
right.
until we get one of those affordable vehicles, I think you're going to see the market continue to skew to more expensive and larger vehicles,
Sure.
because those are the most profitable.
Well, and it looks like China might be coming in with the answer on that cheaper, less expensive EV, right?
Well, that's interesting. Certainly, President Biden and former President Trump agree that tariffs on Chinese zero emission vehicle imports are the right policy. I would expect Vice President Harris to agree.
Yeah.
And so, in the near term, we're probably not going to see Chinese
That's right.
ZEVs in the United States. They are making inroads in Europe.
Yeah.
But and Mexico is having a lot of BYDs in particular is having a lot of success in Mexico.
That's right.
But I think in the near term, the politics of the moment are resistant to having Chinese EVs flood the market.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a good thing, especially with Biden being such a huge supporter of the unions and such. So I think that he'd get some pretty big pushback, or at least Harris would, if in the event they didn't have a pretty strong tariff on there, right?
Yeah, and I think that's what's moving the politics in that direction.
Yeah.
It's like, and if you take it out of the vehicle conversation, if you're trying to support an industrial sector that produces a particular product, you want to allow that sector to survive or thrive before you invite competition to come in.
Yeah.
The fear is that if BYD or one of these other Chinese manufacturers floods the United States market with very affordable EVs, the Fords, GMs, Stellantises, Toyotas, et cetera, won't be able to compete with them because, of course, partly the Chinese government is subsidizing those companies.
Right.
And they could beat the other manufacturers on price.
That's right. That's right. What else is on your to-do list for the rest of the year before we come into 2025?
So we're one of those states that has a full-time legislature. So our legislature is in session until the end of August. So we're watching closely to see if there are any late-breaking developments in the legislature that might impact dealers. We'll be taking a look at what kind of things we might want to try to accomplish in the legislature next year. Mm-hmm. So doing some planning and those kinds of things. And we're constantly in touch with our dealers and taking their pulse about what things are frustrating to them. And so we'll be taking a little bit of stock and preparing for next year. And then I think we're all in this mode with some 80 plus days to go of who's going to win the election. And then once that happens, then people will feel free to make whatever planning or other decisions they want to make. So I think all of us are kind of looking over our shoulders saying, is it Harris? Is it Trump? What's going to happen?
That's right. That's right. And this is one heck of a crazy election time, that's for sure. Just one last question. What's the sentiment of your dealer body today? Are they feeling pretty good about the end of the year or the next 5 months of the year?
Yeah, I think they're kind of in the middle, Jim. Okay. I think, dealers did very well, very profitable during COVID. And they recognized that couldn't last forever.
Right.
And we've returned more to pre-COVID inventory mix. And we talked about the discounting a few minutes ago. And that squeezed profitability a bit. I think if the Fed does cut interest rates and inflation continues to slow, and the product mix becomes more of a broad-based one, I think the dealers will be really happy because they'll have products across the whole range to sell to customers.
Sure. Sounds good. Brian Maas, president of the California New Car Dealers Association. Thank you so much for all the time you've given us here at CBT News. Very much appreciate it. It's always great catching up with you. And best of luck to you as we go into these crazy times, as we're in the middle of these crazy times with election time. So it's fun to watch, that's for sure.
That's for sure. Again, thanks for the opportunity, Jim.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching Inside Automotive with Jim Fitzpatrick.